Welcome to the RJLT Economics. Today I want to switch gears and talk about issues that concern more about people from the developing world, notably China. I want to cover two topics. I'm not entirely certain that I will actually publish two podcasts today, but I have two topics in mind. And here is going to be, in this podcast, I will cover the first one, which is some kind of a caution that I want to give to people who have been considering migrating to the Western developed economies. I want to present four main reasons or four main issues that I hope that these people will consider before making their final decision. And two of them will be about the policies, and two of them will be about the socioeconomic situation that they will be facing. I understand the slight irony here, right? Because I will be talking about these socioeconomic situations that these potential immigrants will be facing while talking in English. Well, part of the reason is that this channel is a English language channel. And of course, part of the reason is that if I'm to speak not in Chinese, not in English, in Chinese rather, this will probably not pass any filter censorship, so that will be not making through at all. So at least this way there will be some people who will, at least I hope, listen to it, and this will probably save some people's lives, right, and livelihood. And doing this, I'm not saying that my opinion is absolutely the right one, but nevertheless, let me just go straight to the 4 points. First, let me cover the 2 points about the policies, the economic policies, economic and political policies of the G20 economies, of the major targets or destinations that Chinese and a lot of the Chinese immigrants or economic immigrants from other countries, from other developing countries are hoping to get to. These are rather common, but one of them is universal, I think, across the Western banking system. One of them, it has been tried in select Anglo-Saxon societies. And these two are bail-ins and internment camps. Number one, let me talk about bail-ins. Bail-in is, I think everyone has heard about bailouts. And bailout is basically the government printing a bunch of money, giving it to banks mostly, when banks, in order to recapitalize failed banks. That's bailout. And the bail-in is basically treating the people who are the clients of a bank, people who have depositors of a bank actually. I think that's the term. Depositors, treating depositors as unsecured creditors. And when bank faces problems, they can recapitalize by seizing essentially part or full, in part or in full, the savings of these unsecured creditors, the depositors. Right. This is called bail-in, and this has been the rule across the European Union since I think 2015. This had been practiced in Cyprus in 2013. And I think this has more or less been the rule in Canada, in Australia, And I think a lot of people have been talking about similar practices that may take place. And I think probably to a lesser extent, if I'm honest, I think less likely in the United States, but elsewhere in the Western economies, in the European Union, this is law. This will happen. In Canada, Australia, this is likely will happen. In America, this is United States of America. It is a possible solution for banks to recapitalize. And this is, I want to talk about this because a lot of the Chinese migrants, they saved, they got a bunch of money speculating in the housing market. And a lot of them, of course, also got their money. I think these are ill-gotten money through corruption, bribery, and all sorts of criminal activities. These people, they need to be very careful because their money can be seized and not be accounted for in these Western economies. So this is number one thing I want them to consider. The second thing is called internment camp. There is little doubt. This has historically had happened. We just only have to look at what happened to the Japanese Americans during World War II. And I think the Chinese Americans and the Chinese Canadians, the Chinese Australians, they probably will face the similar fate if there is a conflict, right? I'm not saying that there is a high probability that a conflict will take place. I'm just saying that take this into consideration because you may be locked up in this sort of concentration camps for years, and this will be not the type of freedom that you are seeking. So that's something also to really consider. I'm not saying that, of course, this will necessarily happen, and perhaps you will enjoy freedom and democracy, liberty, and fraternity. But there is a chance. This is an opportunity. This is a risk that a rational decision maker needs to take into consideration, weighing the different choices, different paths that one can that is available, that are available to one, right? So these are the policy or economic situation factors or issues that I want you to consider. Another two are the more about culture, socioeconomic. So the first one, let's call it the third issue, is the social one. Obviously, a lot of the people who want to make this jump believe some sort of freedom, and they perhaps rightly, wrongly, I think probably rightly, criticize the lack of freedom in Chinese society, in the Chinese political system. There's a lack of representation, and there is also, there are all sorts of criticism that you can lay upon the Chinese government, the Chinese system, the Chinese culture. A lot of them are valid. One thing that you need to consider is that you are going to be considered Chinese, right? You could have a green card, you could have a maple card, or whatever card, or you could have a US passport. You can have a Canadian passport. The problem is always that they will consider you, locals, mostly, let's just say it, right? Mostly the white people will consider you Chinese. Doesn't matter what kind of passport you have. They will consider you as Chinese. And this raises a problem because China is not a friendly country. China is considered by them an unfriendly country. and you are considered by them as part of an unfriendly, invasive culture. You could agree with their culture, but that necessarily entails a bit of internal conflict, if you will. And whether you agree with them or not, what you will experience is less social mobility, is that you will have a lot of difficulty getting decent jobs, that you will have difficulty making friends, that you will have difficulty enjoying the appropriate, at least in your mind, the appropriate social status, right? That is something really you need to take into consideration. To put in the words of a lot of the Chinese people, they like to throw this around. They want to say that this is basically essentially quote unquote second-class citizen. And in a way it is second-class citizen, not because their constitutions are not, or their legal systems are such that they lay prejudice against you, that they are prejudiced against you, that they work against your rights, that they disregard your rights, but rather on the socioeconomic front, you will experience difficulties, challenges that are not really there for people who are of a different ethnicity. Even if they are equally Asian, but perhaps coming from, let's say, Korea, or they come from Japan, they will not face the same problem. But you will face it, right? Because you're from China, or maybe you're from Vietnam, right? Maybe you're from other third world or developing countries. You will face this. And that is something you really need to take into consideration. And another thing is that it is more, this is the last point. It's something that is more material, which is income, right? The average income in these developed countries, developed economies are significantly higher than it is in China, or in other developing countries. But that does not necessarily mean that you doing the type of work that you do will be able to make a lot more, right? Because China, or a lot of the developing countries, have a larger income gap. And a lot of people who are considering migration and who have the possibility or ability to migrate to these developed economies in employment situations whether employment or business situations, business arrangements, where they can make a decent living, right? It is not necessarily the case that when they are in the developed economies that they will be able to make more. Not necessarily. Possibly they will make less, depending on which sector you are in, right? It is, if you are let's say, car mechanic, yeah, sure. It's much better if you are in Canada, Australia, right? The United States. Then you will make a lot more than if you are a car mechanic in China or in Africa or whatever. But if you are a banking, some investment, if you work in investment, if you are in some IT companies, some mid to high level management, you're probably not going to really make more. And that is something you need to consider, right? And a lot of people who also lack the knowledge of local rules, local practices, and a lot of people also lack fluency in local languages. This makes it much more difficult for them to access even the same level of employment that they had enjoyed at home. So they may have to go to a lower grade of employment. That means that they will have perhaps even lower income, and that is in an environment where the standard of living is higher, meaning that actually your expenses will be higher. You earn less, you pay more taxes, but you will face higher costs of living. That combination means that your standard of living can be lower. And that also combined with the third point that I mentioned, basically that you may not be able to enjoy the freedom and democracy or community that you were looking forward to, perhaps basically makes it an overall less appealing proposition. I want to give one last thing. I want to talk about one last thing. And this, again, is about migration. Which is that, in my personal opinion, and I think this is not an opinion that is held solely by me. It is held by a lot of people. It makes zero sense now to try to migrate to Europe. The European economy is kaput. It is the policy of the United States, a lot of people in the US establishment, to deindustrialize Europe, to basically essentially to pawn Europe in order to save the dollar and to save the US economy. And I think they are succeeding. Russia also is going to work towards demilitarizing and deindustrializing Europe, because it's just simply Russia is going to cut off energy and raw material and food supply to Europe this autumn. What is going to happen in Europe is deep recession. It's going to continue. So, that combined with already over a decade of more or less stagnation, that will be a faster decline in living standards. In fact, already this year, we are already forecasting the fastest decline in living standards in the UK since record has existed. And I think similarly, this is a fastest decline in living standards, perhaps in Germany, since 1949. What is going to happen? I don't know. I can't say exactly what's going to happen, but it is going to be very difficult for Europe to climb out of this hole. So you are going to, if you try to migrate to Europe, what you'll be facing is high inflation, potential of bank bail-ins. You will have very little income, if any. Very difficult to find a job. You will find some cultures that are a society that are not really that welcoming, and you will find that overall your standard of living may continue to decline, I think, for years to come. That is not really a good situation. I think if you have the money, and if you don't like China, and I'm pretty open-minded, I'm perfectly fine if you are not patriotic, if you think, fuck China, right? I'm Chinese, but whatever, right? You think that it's good that if I get a stars, what is it called, stars Brangle spanner, that's gonna be great, right? That's fine. That's totally fine by me. I think if you have the financial resources, I honestly think that the United States is not that bad a place. Even though the inflation is high, even though I think that the dollarization will continue to deepen in the decades to come, in the short to medium term, I think the United States will remain the dominant economic power. In the long term, I think that really thanks to the collection of people, very entrepreneurial people, very hardworking people, and people with, at least I think still a lot of people who really believe in self-reliance, people who believe in industries. I think in the long term, in 30, 40, 50 years, the American economy will still be one of the most important in the world. Its living standards will still be one of the highest ones in the world. It probably won't be the sole dominant power, but that does not matter, right? You're not going there to be the emperor. You're going there just to be a normal resident. Then I think the United States, it could be a good option. It has lots of resources and it has a big enough market. It's very entrepreneurial, all good. And if you are to retire, I think Australia and New Zealand are not so bad either. Although they have small markets, that they are very far away, disconnected from the rest of the world. I think their economy developed quite well in the last few decades, 2 decades in particular, thanks to their economic cooperation with China. But with new shift in global geopolitics, I think Australia has cut itself off the economic system of China. And that means that I think, just look at the map. Where is Australia close to? Right? It's a rather large country with a lot of resources, but very small market. So its economy is very difficult to develop on its own. It needs to have economic linkages with neighboring countries and share a common prosperity. But if it has, and it is having, worsening relationships with China, with Indonesia, where else is it close to? Nowhere. So I think the economic development in Australia will be probably less good as it has been in the last 2 decades in particular. And that means that if you are still in an age that you need to work, that you want to make a living, probably migrating to Australia and New Zealand, not such a great idea. But if you have already made all your money, you go to Australia, you have money, right? You have a lot of money. You go to Australia, invest in some farms, some mines, and then you just don't do anything else. Perhaps that is a decent, that's probably a very good idea indeed. So I'm not saying that nobody should consider migrating, right? I think I'm pretty open-minded. I personally don't have money, so I'm considering moving back to China because, I think Europe is not good. So I don't have money, right? These rich countries, they see, wow, this poor loser, we don't want him in there. So I fully accept that. So I probably go back to China. I do whatever I can just to live. I've adopted the view that money is not important, and wealth. Personal wealth, it's not something that is very important. It's more important to enjoy life. Whatever you have, you enjoy it, and you don't stress yourself about such things as housing prices or material belongings. But really, how much free time you have to explore what life has made available to you, right? What your friendship, nature. These are the things that that I think are more important. Not really how much money you have, because however much money you have, and how many houses you have, you're not going to be able to bring 1 cent or 1 square meter to afterlife, or if there is an afterlife. All you have is now, and if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to enjoy anything. Right. So that's that. All right, I think that's my rambling with regards to migration. I will post this as always on YouTube, Odyssey, and Rumble. And I will try to also post it on Chinese social media. Let's say if I got censored there. Remember that I have a Telegram channel. I will leave the link in the description below, if I so remember. And of course, I also have a website, drglt.com. That's mostly my blog with some pictures there. You can follow me, of course, also on Facebook. No, don't go to Facebook. What a shit platform. You can go on Twitter as well. But that is another shit platform. Let's just be honest. Anyway, have a great day. Thank you for listening.